Bobby Martinez's alarm pulsed at 5 a.m., a soft vibration through the neural patch behind his ear, the kind of basic biotech that had been standard issue for 20 years but that he'd never bothered upgrading. He dismissed it with a thought, his eyes opening to the dim blue glow filtering through curtains that didn't auto-adjust because he'd disabled that feature. The rental house was quiet in the way only old construction could be, no ambient AI suggesting optimal wake routines, no smart home systems announcing overnight news curated to his interests, no holographic displays materializing with his daily schedule, just silence. And the photograph of Maria on his dresser, backlit by the streetlight outside. Her smile frozen in time before the cancer took her. Bobby rose from bed, actual coil springs, not molecular foam that analyzed his sleep patterns and reported to health insurance algorithms. His feet found worn carpet instead of temperature-regulated flooring. The house was 2 bedrooms in a neighborhood where affordable housing meant structures from the 2020s that still required physical keys, where neighbors actually knew each other's names instead of just their proximity ratings on community safety apps. His morning routine was analog by deliberate choice. He measured instant coffee from a jar that required him to twist the lid, boiled water in a kettle with a manual dial. Ate oatmeal from a cardboard canister purchased at a farmer's market where humans still exchanged physical currency. While the water heated, he scanned the local newspaper, actual paper, delivered by an actual person, containing articles written primarily by humans rather than content generation algorithms. The sports section reported that Lincoln Middle School's robotics team had made regionals. Bobby smiled. He'd helped those kids source parts from recycling centers, teaching them that innovation didn't require unlimited budgets. He dressed in his work uniform, navy blue coveralls with Lincoln Middle School, custodial services, embroidered on the chest, a name tag reading simply Bobby, because the kids couldn't pronounce Martinez properly when he'd started 26 years ago and the nickname had stuck. The uniform was cleaned weekly at a laundromat where washers still required quarters, where people still made small talk while their clothes tumbled. His pickup truck sat in the driveway like a monument to obsolescence, 22 years old, held together by maintenance and stubbornness, its combustion engine a relic in an age of electric everything. The paint was faded, rust bloomed around the wheel wells, and the seats were patched with duct tape. But the engine turned over reliably when Bobby twisted the physical key in the ignition, and the radio, stuck permanently on the local AM station, crackled to life with traffic updates delivered by a human voice that stumbled occasionally over pronunciations. Bobby drove through streets where autonomous vehicles glided silently past, their passengers visible through smart glass, heads tilted down, eyes tracking information streams only they could see through retinal implants or AR contacts. His truck coughed and sputtered at intersections where traffic lights had been replaced by AI coordination systems that his vehicle was too old to communicate with, forcing him to navigate by old-fashioned observation and timing. Lincoln Middle School rose ahead, a building from the 2010s, before educational facilities became sterile spaces optimized for algorithmic learning. The parking lot was half full with teachers' cars, most of them modest vehicles for people who'd chosen education over profit. Bobby parked in his usual spot, the same space he'd occupied for over 2 decades, and felt the familiar satisfaction of routine, of belonging, of purpose. The school was his kingdom. He knew every corner, every quirk of the plumbing, every student who struggled and everyone who thrived. 7th grader Marcus Chen, whose father was deployed overseas with the Pacific Security Force, Bobby always asked about him, left small notes of encouragement in the boys' locker when report cards came out. 6th grader Sofia Rodriguez, who struggled with the new AI-assisted math curriculum, Bobby had quietly arranged for her to work with a human tutor, funded through channels Sophia's family would never trace. The 8th grade science club that needed equipment for their projects, Bobby knew which recycling centers yielded the best salvage, which companies donated obsolete tech that still functioned perfectly well for curious minds. The teachers loved him because he fixed things before anyone else noticed they were broken. The principal respected him because in 26 years, Bobby had never once asked for special treatment or recognition. The kids trusted him because he listened without judgment, helped without condescension, and never, ever treated them like data points in an achievement algorithm. What none of them knew, what Bobby had hidden with careful precision for 18 years, was that the man mopping their floors and unclogging their toilets was worth approximately $47 million. In 2007, when Emma was 8 years old and still processing her mother's death, Bobby Martinez had won the lottery. $54 million. After taxes and fees, $32 million in a lump sum that most people would have immediately converted into visible wealth, luxury homes, expensive vehicles, conspicuous consumption that broadcast success. Bobby had done none of those things. Instead, he'd contacted Diane Chen, a financial advisor recommended by a co-worker's cousin, and told her something that had apparently shocked her into silence. "I want to invest this. I want it to grow. And I want to keep living exactly like I am now." "You want to what?" Diane had asked, her voice crackling through Bobby's outdated phone. "I want my daughter to grow up with values. Real values. Her mother died believing that worth isn't measured in dollars, and I'm not going to prove her wrong by turning into someone who thinks money equals character." There had been a long pause on the line. Then, "Mr. Martinez, I think we should meet in person. There are things we need to discuss." That meeting had been 18 years ago. Diane had been 40, newly established in her own practice, hungry to prove herself. Bobby had been 40, recently widowed, terrified of making the wrong choice for Emma's future. They'd met at a diner, Diane in a business suit that probably cost more than Bobby's monthly rent, Bobby in his work uniform because he'd come straight from the school. "Most people who win the lottery," Diane had said, spreading financial documents across the laminate table, "lose everything within 5 years. Statistically, you're more likely to declare bankruptcy than to sustain wealth." "I know," Bobby had said. "That's why I want to hire you. To make sure Emma's future is secure. To make sure this money does some good instead of destroying us." Diane had studied him for a long moment. "You're serious about not changing your lifestyle?" "Completely serious. No new house? No new car? No luxury purchases. I like my house. My truck runs fine. And luxury doesn't interest me as much as knowing my kid will have what she needs and that maybe I can help some other people along the way." Diane had smiled, the first genuine smile Bobby had seen from her. "Mr. Martinez, I think this is going to be a very interesting professional relationship." She'd been right. Over 18 years, Diane had managed Bobby's portfolio with aggressive intelligence and careful ethics. The initial $32 million had grown to $47 million through strategic investments in sustainable technologies, real estate properties that provided affordable housing, and ventures that prioritized long-term stability over short-term profit. Bobby took nothing from the returns except the satisfaction of knowing his money was working towards something meaningful. Instead, he'd established the Santos Family Foundation, using his mother's maiden name for privacy, and begun systematically changing lives. 47 full-ride college scholarships awarded to students who showed promise but lacked resources. Medical bills paid for 11 families facing bankruptcy because American healthcare still hadn't figured out how to prioritize human life over profit margins. 2 community centers built in neighborhoods where kids needed safe spaces more than they needed another algorithmic learning center. Countless smaller donations to local causes, always anonymous, always focused on impact rather than recognition. Bobby lived on his janitor's salary, $42,000 annually, enough for rent, food, utilities, and Emma's modest childhood. He drove his old truck because it functioned. He shopped at thrift stores because the clothes fit and who cared about brands. He ate at diners where coffee was terrible but pie was excellent and nobody measured your worth by your credit score. And he'd raised Emma to believe that this was normal, that this was right, that measuring success by possessions rather than character was the surest path to moral bankruptcy. Emma Martinez had become exactly who Bobby hoped she'd be. At 26, she was a social worker specializing in family services, he was a wealth management consultant, which meant he helped rich people stay rich while looking down on everyone else, and he came from the kind of old money that measured worth in generational trust funds and country club memberships. Emma had met him 8 months ago at a charity gala. She'd been volunteering, managing check-in for an event benefiting homeless youth services. Tristan had been networking, working the room with practiced charm, collecting contacts like other people collected social media followers. According to Emma, they'd talked for 20 minutes while he waited for his coat. He'd asked about her work with genuine interest, or what had seemed like genuine interest at the time. He'd gotten her number. He'd called the next day. The courtship had been whirlwind by design. Expensive restaurants where menus didn't list prices, weekend trips to resort towns Emma had only seen in travel feeds, introduction to a world of country clubs and networking events where everyone performed wealth with exhausting precision. Emma had called Bobby after the 3rd date, her voice uncertain. "Dad, Is it weird that I feel uncomfortable every time we go out? Like I'm wearing someone else's clothes. Maybe you are, Bobby had said gently. Maybe you need to figure out if you're uncomfortable because it's new, or uncomfortable because it's wrong. She'd figured it out too late. Or maybe she'd figured it out and ignored it because Tristan was handsome and charming and made her feel special in ways that masked the fundamental incompatibility of their values. The proposal had happened at a restaurant that required reservations 6 months in advance, where the sommelier had a degree in wine selection from a European university, where the engagement ring cost $30,000 and came with certification from a gemologist whose credentials were verified by blockchain. Emma had said yes because she loved him, because she wanted to believe love was enough, because she was 26 and hopeful and hadn't yet learned that some differences can't be bridged by affection alone. Bobby had met Tristan exactly 3 times before the engagement, twice for coffee in Bobby's neighborhood, casual meetings where Tristan had checked his watch frequently and made comments about authentic local flavor that felt like anthropological observation, and once at a family barbecue where Tristan had worn designer casual wear and looked uncomfortable the entire time. At no point had Tristan asked Bobby about his work with genuine interest. At no point had he inquired about Bobby's life, his history, his values beyond superficial pleasantries. At no point had he looked at Bobby and seen a person worth knowing rather than an embarrassing obligation that came with marrying Emma. The warning signs had been everywhere, but Emma, kind, optimistic Emma who believed people could grow and change, had missed them or ignored them. Now the wedding was 48 hours away, and Bobby was driving to the Belmont Country Club for the rehearsal dinner, and he was about to watch his daughter's fiancé's family treat him like he was invisible. The question gnawing at Bobby's mind as he navigated traffic was whether revealing his wealth would help Emma or hurt her. Whether showing the Blackwells he was worth $47 million would expose their shallow values or simply prove them right, that worth was measured in bank balances rather than character. His phone, an older model that required him to actually touch the screen rather than responding to neural commands, buzzed with a text from Diane. Still planning to attend tonight? I'm assuming they're going to be awful. Want backup? Bobby had sent her an invitation to the rehearsal dinner 3 days ago, more as a gesture than an expectation. Diane was his financial advisor, not his date. She managed his portfolio with brilliant efficiency, met with him quarterly to review investments, and had been, he'd thought, a consummate professional for 18 years. He typed back with his thumbs, old school, "They'll be fine." "You don't need to come." Her response was immediate. "That's not what I asked. I asked if you want backup. Because I'm coming either way. See you at 7. Bobby stared at the message, something warm and unexpected stirring in his chest. Diane was coming. To support him. To witness the Blackwell family's performance of superiority. To stand beside him while they treated him like he was beneath them. Why? He didn't have time to process the question. The Belmont Country Club's entrance appeared ahead, all manicured lawns and architectural statements, the kind of place designed to remind you that you probably didn't belong unless your portfolio cleared 7 figures. Bobby's truck coughed black smoke as he turned into the circular driveway, immediately conspicuous among the Teslas and Mercedes and vehicles so expensive they probably had names instead of model numbers. The valet, a young man in his 20s wearing white gloves and an expression of barely concealed distaste, approached with visible reluctance. Bobby handed him the keys. She's old, but she runs reliable. Clutch is sticky on second gear. The valet took the keys like they might contaminate him, his neural implant probably already tagging this interaction for later mockery in whatever social feed he frequented. Bobby watched his truck get driven around the building, out of sight, hidden from guests who might be offended by visible poverty, and felt the first stirrings of anger. He'd spent 18 years living modestly by choice, raising Emma with values instead of trust funds, helping people without recognition. He'd done everything right according to the principles Maria had died believing in, and these people were going to judge him for it. Bobby walked into the Belmont Country Club lobby, all marble floors and crystal chandeliers, oil paintings of dead founders in gilded frames, furniture that looked expensive and uncomfortable in equal measure. A hostess with a professional smile and calculating eyes greeted him. "Welcome to Belmont Country Club. Do you have a reservation? Blackwell rehearsal dinner." "I'm the bride's father." Her expression flickered, surprise, maybe pity, before resetting to professional courtesy. "Of course. Right this way, Mr. Martinez." Bobby Martinez, She led him through corridors designed to impress, past dining rooms where people in expensive clothes ate expensive food and performed expensive conversations. Bobby's work boots, cleaned but showing their age, squeaked slightly on the marble. His khakis and button-down shirt, pressed carefully but purchased at Walmart 8 years ago, marked him as definitively out of place. The private dining room was already half full. Victoria Blackwell spotted him immediately and swooped in with predatory efficiency, her smile bright and her eyes cold. Emma's father. Robert, correct? Or do you prefer Bob? She air-kissed near his cheeks without actually making contact. How rustic you look. Did you have any trouble finding the club? GPS can be so unreliable in neighborhoods that aren't, well, you understand. Bobby understood perfectly. Bobby's fine. Ma'am. GPS worked perfect. Beautiful place. Oh, we don't own it, we just belong. Victoria laughed like she'd made a hilarious joke. Though between you and me, Marcus has been on the board for 15 years. We practically run the place. Her eyes scanned his outfit with surgical precision. I do hope you brought something appropriate for tomorrow. The wedding has a very strict black tie dress code. I could recommend an excellent rental service if you need assistance. Got a suit at home, ma'am. Had it a while, but it still fits. How wonderfully economical. The word economical landed like an insult wrapped in praise. Well, come along. Let me show you to your table. She guided him through the room like a handler managing an unpredictable animal, past the head table where Tristan and Emma sat surrounded by Blackwell family and friends, past tables of well-dressed guests who glanced at Bobby and away with the practiced disinterest of people accustomed to invisible service staff. Bobby's assigned seat was at table 7, far from the action, positioned between a man who introduced himself as Gerald, I own 3 dealerships, luxury vehicles exclusively, and another who mumbled something about being an accountant for Marcus's hedge fund. The 2 other seats at the table remained empty, their place cards reading names Bobby didn't recognize. Emma caught his eye from across the room and mouthed, "I'm sorry." Bobby smiled and waved her off, but the tightness in his chest suggested his daughter knew exactly what was happening and felt powerless to stop it. The dinner began with speeches Bobby couldn't hear properly from his distant vantage point, with wine he didn't drink because he'd given up alcohol when Maria got sick, with appetizers that cost more per bite than Bobby spent on a week's worth of groceries. Gerald talked endlessly about luxury vehicle market trends. The accountant checked his phone with barely concealed boredom. Bobby ate his overpriced food and thought about the kids at Lincoln Middle School, about Marcus Chen who'd gotten his math grade up to AB, about Sofia Rodriguez who'd been accepted to the district's advanced science program. About all the ways success could be measured that had nothing to do with country club membership or designer labels. Diane Shin walked into the Belmont Country Club dining room 17 minutes after the scheduled start time, and every head turned not because she commanded attention through ostentation but because she moved through space like someone who understood that confidence required no announcement. She wore a black dress that cost $2,200 but looked effortless, the kind of clothing that whispered wealth to people trained to recognize quality while remaining invisible to everyone else. Her jewelry was minimal, a vintage Patek Philippe watch on her left wrist, no rings, no necklace, nothing that screamed for validation. Her hair was pulled back in a simple twist that suggested she'd spent 5 minutes on it, though Bobby knew from 18 years of quarterly meetings that Diane Shin never did anything without careful consideration. Victoria Blackwell materialized at the entrance like a heat-seeking missile locked onto potential social disruption, her hostess' smile strained at the edges. "I'm sorry, but this is a private event." Invitation only. Diane pulled a printed card from her clutch, actual paper, Bobby's handwriting on the envelope, the invitation he'd sent 3 days ago, knowing she probably wouldn't come but needing her to know she was welcome. Diane Chen. Robert Santos invited me. I believe he's seated at table 7. The name Robert Santos hit Victoria like a physical blow. Her pupils dilated slightly, her smile faltered, her hand moved unconsciously to touch the diamond pendant at her throat, a nervous gesture Bobby had noticed earlier when Marcus mentioned their portfolio performance. Everyone on the charity circuit knew the name Robert Santos. Major anonymous philanthropist. Santos Wing at Mercy Hospital. Santos Scholarship Program at State University. Sitting on boards for half the city's most prestigious foundations. His identity was fiercely guarded, his wealth legendary, his influence undeniable. Robert Santos? Victoria's voice pitched higher. I don't believe we have anyone registered under that name. Diane's gaze swept the room and landed on Bobby with the precision of a targeting system acquiring its mark. Her entire expression transformed, professional mask dissolving into something warm and delighted and unmistakably affectionate in ways that made Bobby's chest tighten with emotions he'd been carefully not examining for the better part of 2 decades. There he is. She moved through the dining room, ignoring Victoria's protests, ignoring the seating chart Victoria was frantically checking on her tablet, ignoring the whispered conversations that paused as she passed. She walked like she belonged anywhere she chose to be, and Bobby realized with sudden clarity that this was what actual confidence looked like, not the Blackwell family's performance of superiority through expensive labels and calculated condescension, but the quiet certainty of someone who'd earned everything she had and owed no one explanations. Bobby. She said his name like coming home after a long absence, like the answer to a question she'd been asking for years. I'm sorry I'm late. Hospital board meeting ran over, you know how those get. Bobby stood reflexively, his chair scraping against marble floors, his heart doing something complicated and uncomfortable in his chest. Diane. I didn't think you'd actually come. Miss your daughter's rehearsal dinner? She kissed his cheek, her lips lingering just slightly longer than professional courtesy required, close enough that he caught her perfume, cedar and something floral he couldn't identify, expensive but understated like everything else about her. Not a chance. She looked at the table of strangers staring at her with varying degrees of confusion. Gerald's mouth had fallen slightly open. Philip had set down his phone. Susan was actually paying attention for the first time all evening. I hope someone's going to introduce me to Emma's new family. The conversations around them died like someone had activated a silence field. Tristan appeared from the head table, moving with the aggressive purposefulness of someone whose territorial instincts had been triggered. His smile was bright and calculating and entirely failed to reach his eyes. I'm Tristan Blackwell. The groom. And you are? Diane extended her hand with the kind of professional warmth that somehow suggested she was doing him a favor by acknowledging his existence. Diane Chen. I'm Bobby's financial advisor. And his oldest friend. We've worked together for 18 years. I handle all his investments, charitable giving, property management, tax strategy, estate planning. The usual portfolio management services. Tristan's smile faltered like a video feed experiencing lag. Financial advisor? I wasn't aware Bobby had need of. Bobby prefers to keep his financial affairs private, Diane interrupted smoothly, her voice pleasant but carrying an edge sharp enough to draw blood if you were paying attention. But I'm here as a friend tonight, not in a professional capacity. She paused, her smile sharpening by increments too small to photograph but too significant to miss. Though technically I suppose I'm always working when it comes to Bobby's portfolio. It requires quite a bit of specialized attention. Marcus Blackwell had materialized at Tristan's shoulder, his hedge fund manager instincts apparently capable of detecting wealth from across crowded rooms. Diane Chen? That name sounds familiar. Have we met at fundraising events? I'm a private wealth manager. Chen Financial Advisory Group. I work primarily with high net worth clients who value discretion over visibility. She delivered the information casually, like discussing weather patterns or traffic conditions. Bobby's been my longest-standing client. Nearly 2 decades now. Something shifted in the room's energy, subtle but unmistakable, like barometric pressure changing before a storm. Diane sat in one of the empty chairs at table 7 without waiting for invitation or permission, claiming space beside Bobby with the confidence of someone who belonged wherever she chose to be. Gerald straightened his posture. Philip stopped looking bored. Susan set down her phone and actually made eye contact. Victoria arrived at the table with the forced brightness of someone trying to maintain control of a situation rapidly escaping her management. "I'm sorry, I don't quite understand." "Bobby, you have a wealth management advisor?" "Everyone should have financial planning," Diane said lightly, pulling her tablet from her bag and setting it on the table with deliberate casualness. Though Bobby's situation does require somewhat more specialized attention than most portfolios, Scarlett Blackwell, Tristan's sister, the Instagram influencer with 800,000 followers and a phone that probably cost more than Bobby's monthly rent, had been filming discreetly since Diane's arrival. Now she leaned forward, her content creator instincts clearly screaming that this was gold. "This is amazing. So Bobby, you have investments? That's so smart. I love when blue-collar workers are financially responsible." "It's very authentic." Diane's expression went from pleasant to arctic in the space between heartbeats. "Blue-collar? Is that what you think he is?" "Well, he's a janitor, so technically, he's a janitor who happens to be a multi-millionaire philanthropist," Diane interrupted, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "But please, continue patronizing him. I'm finding it extremely illuminating." Tristan laughed nervously, the sound hollow and uncertain. "I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding." "No misunderstanding whatsoever." Diane turned to look at Bobby, and the way she looked at him, like he was something precious and rare and infinitely valuable, made Bobby's throat tighten with emotions he didn't have vocabulary to process. "Bobby, you've been letting these people treat you like you're worthless all evening. I can see it on your face. I've known you too long not to recognize when you're being diminished." She took his hand across the table, bold and public and deliberate, her fingers warm against his calloused palm. 18 years I've known you. 18 years you've been the kindest, most generous, most impossibly stubborn man I've ever met. You won $54 million in the lottery and decided to keep mopping floors because you genuinely love those kids at that school. You funded 47 full-ride college scholarships while driving a truck held together with duct tape and prayer. You've donated $134 million to charitable causes while living in a rental house with linoleum floors from the 1980s. The dining room had gone completely silent. Conversations at other tables died mid-sentence. Even the waitstaff had stopped moving, frozen in tableau like a simulation that had paused mid-execution. Diane's voice softened but remained audible to everyone in the room. "And I'm tired, Bobby. I'm tired of pretending I'm here in a purely professional capacity. I'm tired of scheduling portfolio review meetings during dinner hours and pretending it's accidental. I'm tired of watching you let people who aren't worth a fraction of your character make you feel like you're not enough." Bobby's mouth had gone completely dry. "Diane, this really isn't the appropriate time." "When is the appropriate time? Your daughter's getting married tomorrow. If I don't say this now, when will I get another chance?" She looked at him with a vulnerability Bobby had never seen in 18 years of professional meetings, of quarterly reviews, of conversations that always stayed carefully within the boundaries of advisor and client. "I've been in love with you for 17 years. Since our 5th meeting, when you explained you wanted to establish scholarships specifically for children of custodial staff because everyone deserves a shot regardless of what their parents do for work. That's when I knew." Bobby couldn't speak. His brain had apparently stopped processing language. The entire room stared at them like they were the evening's entertainment, which, he supposed with a distant part of his mind that was still capable of rational thought, they had become. Diane turned back to the table, her professional armor snapping back into place with visible effort. So yes, Bobby has a financial advisor. And yes, his portfolio requires weekly strategy sessions and quarterly comprehensive reviews because when you have $47 million and you're actively trying to give most of it away while still generating sustainable returns for ongoing charitable work, the complexity is significant. She activated her tablet, her fingers moving across the holographic interface with practiced efficiency. Would you like to see the details? Since apparently we're discussing his private financial information publicly now, Bobby wanted to stop her. Wanted to preserve the privacy he'd maintained for 18 years. Wanted to protect the quiet life he'd built where worth was measured in relationships and impact rather than account balances. But he looked at Emma across the room, his daughter with tears streaming down her face, watching the man she'd agreed to marry realize in real time that he'd been catastrophically wrong about her father. And Bobby understood that sometimes silence was complicity, that sometimes protecting other people's comfort meant sacrificing your own dignity. That sometimes the kindest thing you could do was force people to confront the truth about what they valued. Show them, Bobby said quietly. Diane projected the information onto the table's smart surface, the holographic display expanding to fill the space between place settings and wine glasses. Robert Santos, Comprehensive Portfolio Summary Primary Investment Holdings. $47,382,940 real estate assets, $12.4 million. 18 commercial properties generating $87,000 monthly rental income, Santos family. Foundation endowment, $8.7 million 18-year charitable distribution total, $134,647,000, major philanthropic holdings, Belmont Grand Ballroom and Event Center, $4.2 million, acquired 2013, Mercy Hospital's Santos Wing, $8 million endowment, established 2010. Santos Scholarship Fund, $6.3 million endowment, 47 full-ride scholarships awarded, Lincoln Community Center, $2.1 million, construction and ongoing operational funding, medical debt relief, 11 families, $847,000 total, anonymous grants and donations, 143 recipients, $3.2 million distributed. The room erupted in chaos. Victoria's face had gone the color of old paper. Marcus was scrolling frantically through his phone, presumably searching for confirmation. Scarlett had stopped filming, her influencer instincts apparently short-circuiting in the face of actual news rather than curated content. Tristan looked like he might vomit on the expensive tablecloth. The Belmont Grand Ballroom? Victoria's voice came out strangled. Where we're having the wedding tomorrow? You own, bought it 12 years ago as an investment property, Bobby confirmed. Diane handles all the rental contracts and property management. It generates decent returns and provides a venue for community events at reduced rates. Marcus had found what he was looking for on his phone. The Santos Wing. The Santos Scholarship Program. The Santos Community Center downtown. Robert Santos, that's you? You're the anonymous donor everyone's been trying to identify for 2 decades. My mother's maiden name, Bobby said. I use it for financial privacy. Or I did, anyway. Tristan finally found his voice, though it emerged several pitches higher than his usual calculated confidence. You're worth $47 million, give or take depending on market fluctuations and ongoing charitable distributions, Diane confirmed clinically. The real estate holdings vary with property values, and the foundation endowment grows or contracts based on investment performance. But approximately $47 million in liquid assets, yes. She turned back to Bobby, and when she spoke again her voice dropped to something intimate despite their very public audience, something that suggested the rest of the room had ceased to exist in any meaningful way. You want to know what I love most about you, Bobby Martinez? You've had access to more money than most people see in 10 lifetimes. And you chose to spend it on other people. You chose to keep working a job that makes you happy instead of one designed to impress strangers. You chose to raise Emma with authentic values instead of trust fund entitlement. You chose character over capital every single day for 18 years. She leaned closer, her hands still holding his, her eyes locked on his face with an intensity that made Bobby's heart do complicated things in his chest. And you chose to keep having boring portfolio meetings with me instead of hiring some prestigious wealth management firm, even though I kept accidentally scheduling those meetings during dinner hours and wearing outfits that were definitely not business casual. You're very oblivious, Bobby Martinez. Very frustrating for a woman who's been trying to flirt with you for the better part of 2 decades. Bobby's voice emerged barely above a whisper. You were flirting with me, every single meeting for the past 3 years at minimum. The portfolio reviews that somehow always happened at restaurants. The quarterly summaries I insisted on delivering in person when email would have been more efficient. The time I suggested we celebrate your foundation reaching 5 million with champagne and you showed up with apple juice because you remembered I don't drink alcohol. Her smile was soft and vulnerable and absolutely devastating. That's when I knew you were paying attention. Just not to the things I actually wanted you to notice. I didn't think. Bobby struggled to form coherent sentences. Diane, you're brilliant and successful and you could have literally anyone. Why would you possibly want a 58-year-old janitor? Because you're not a janitor. You're Bobby Martinez, the man who brings donuts to our meeting specifically for my assistant because you remember she's studying for her CPA exam and stress eats during testing season. You're the man who asked detailed questions about my nephew's college applications because you wanted to help with scholarship recommendations even though you'd never met him. You're the man who turned down a 7-figure luxury condo development investment because you discovered the developer planned to displace low-income families without adequate relocation support. Her voice caught slightly. That's who I love. Not your portfolio. The dining room remained frozen in suspended animation. Every guest watching this confession unfold like spectators at an accident scene, unable to look away, uncertain whether they should intervene or simply bear witness. Tristan finally recovered enough motor function to stammer words. Bobby, Robert, Mr. Santos, I had absolutely no idea. If I'd known, I obviously would have treated me differently, Bobby finished quietly, something like sadness threading through his voice. That's exactly why I didn't tell you. Or anyone. Because I wanted to see who you really were when you thought I had nothing to offer except being Emma's father. Victoria had apparently processed enough of the situation to activate her social climbing protocols. Well, this is wonderful news, actually. Of course, we always knew there was something special about Emma's family. The Santos Foundation, we've certainly heard of it. Marcus, didn't we make a donation to the Santos Scholarship Fund last year? You donated $500, Diane said flatly, pulling up the transaction on her tablet. To a fund that Bobby personally endowed with $6.3 million. He received your thank you card. It listed 12 different board positions in the letterhead. He found it performative and somewhat missing the point of anonymous philanthropy. Marcus attempted damage control with the desperation of a man watching his social positioning crumble in real time. Robert, Bobby, I sincerely apologize if there was any miscommunication regarding. Emma turned to Tristan, her voice shaking with something between fury and heartbreak. Are you sorry because you were cruel to my father? Or are you sorry because it turns out he's rich enough to be worth your respect? Tristan opened his mouth. Closed it. Opened it again. The honest answer was apparently too damning to speak aloud. That's what I thought. Emma pulled the engagement ring from her finger with sharp, decisive movements. We need to talk. Right now. Privately, she walked toward the exit. Tristan followed, his carefully cultivated confidence completely shattered, leaving behind a room full of guests processing the most spectacular social implosion most of them had probably ever witnessed in person. Bobby stood, Diane rising beside him, their hands still clasped together. I think we're done here. They moved toward the entrance together, and as they passed the head table Bobby paused to look at Victoria with something like pity. The wedding venue tomorrow. The Belmont Grand Ballroom. I'm waiving the rental fee completely. Consider it my wedding gift to Emma regardless of what she decides to do, marry Tristan, throw a party, cancel everything. Her choice. Her life, he looked at Marcus. And regarding those retirement planning services you kept offering me? I appreciate the concern, but Diane's been handling my financial affairs for 18 years. I think we've managed reasonably well. They walked out of the Belmont Country Club, leaving behind chaos and whispered conversations and a family whose entire understanding of worth and value and what actually mattered had just been systematically demolished by a 58-year-old janitor and the woman who'd loved him quietly for nearly 2 decades while he'd been too focused on raising his daughter with real values to notice. In the parking lot, standing beside Bobby's ancient pickup truck under sodium vapor lights that cast everything in shades of amber and shadow, Diane finally released his hand. "I'm sorry," she said. "That was probably not how you wanted the evening to go." Bobby looked at her, really looked at her for maybe the first time in 18 years. Seeing past the professional competence and financial expertise to the woman underneath who'd apparently been waiting for him to notice. "You told me you love me. In front of 50 people, I do love you. Have loved you. Will continue loving you whether you reciprocate those feelings or not." She met his gaze directly, vulnerable but not apologetic. "But I meant every word. I'm not in love with your portfolio, Bobby. I'm in love with the man who chooses kindness over capital, who measures success in lives improved rather than assets accumulated, who spent 18 years raising his daughter to value character while these people valued credit scores." Bobby cupped her face gently with his free hand, his thumb brushing her cheekbone with careful reverence. "Diane Chen. I've been an absolute idiot, I'm aware. I've known for approximately 17 years. I didn't let myself believe you could actually care about me because I couldn't separate the money from who I am. I thought if someone knew, really knew, they'd see me differently. The way the Blackwells did tonight, Bobby. I've known exactly how much money you have for 18 years. Managing your portfolio is literally my profession, I know. But watching you tonight, defending me in front of all those people, risking your professional reputation to tell them the truth, confessing that you love me in front of witnesses." He leaned closer. Close enough to see the silver threading through her dark hair, close enough to count the tiny lines at the corners of her eyes that suggested she smiled more than her serious professional demeanor usually revealed. "I realized I've been in love with you for years. I was just too terrified to admit it." He kissed her then, soft and tentative and tasting like hope and 18 years of unspoken feelings and the possibility of something new beginning from the ruins of what had just been demolished inside. When they broke apart, both slightly breathless, Diane smiled. "So, does this mean I can stop pretending our portfolio meetings are strictly business? This means I'm taking you to dinner tomorrow night after we figure out what Emma decides to do about this wedding. A real dinner. Not a portfolio review disguised as a meal, deal?" She looked up at him in the sodium light, her expression soft and open and more vulnerable than he'd ever seen her. "Bobby Martinez, you're the best man I know. Don't ever let anyone make you feel otherwise." Somewhere inside the country club, the Blackwell family was probably still processing their spectacular humiliation. Emma was probably having the most important conversation of her life with Tristan. The carefully constructed social hierarchies were probably crumbling in real time, but standing in the parking lot holding Diane Chen's hand, Bobby Martinez felt something he hadn't felt in the 18 years since Maria died, the possibility that maybe, just maybe, he was allowed to choose happiness for himself instead of only facilitating it for others. Sometimes revenge wasn't about destroying your enemies. Sometimes it was about revealing the truth and walking away with someone who'd seen your value all along. Bobby and Diane sat in his pickup truck in the country club parking lot at 11:43 p.m., neither moving to start the engine, both processing what had just detonated inside the Belmont Country Club's carefully curated world of performative wealth. The sodium vapor lights cast everything in amber and shadow, and through the truck's grimy windshield Bobby could see other vehicles departing, sleek electric sedans gliding silently away. Their passengers probably already posting about the evening's spectacular social implosion to their curated feeds. "I can't believe you actually did that," Bobby said finally, his voice rough with emotions he didn't have vocabulary to process. "I can't believe you let them treat you that way for 6 months without saying something." Diane's voice was gentle but carried steel underneath. "Bobby, I understand why you kept the money secret from Emma. I even respect the reasoning. But watching them mock you, belittle you, treat you like you were invisible or worse, worthless, I couldn't stay silent anymore. You told me you love me. In front of 50 people and probably a dozen recording devices. I do love you. Have loved you for 17 years. Will continue loving you regardless of whether you reciprocate those feelings." She looked at him directly in the dim light, her professional armor completely stripped away. But I meant every word I said in there. I'm not in love with your portfolio, Bobby Martinez. I'm in love with the man who keeps choosing people over profit, kindness over status, authentic values over visible success. Bobby's hands were still shaking slightly from adrenaline crash. Diane, I've been an idiot, I'm aware. I've known for approximately 17 years that you're oblivious to romantic signals. I didn't let myself believe you could actually care about me because I couldn't separate the money from who I am as a person. I thought if someone knew, really knew about the lottery, the investments, all of it, they'd see me differently. The way the Blackwells saw me tonight once they found out. Bobby. Diane reached across the truck's bench seat to take his hand. I've known exactly how much money you have for 18 years. Managing your wealth is literally my profession. And I fell in love with you anyway, or maybe because of how you handled having that wealth. You're the only client I've ever had who won the lottery and immediately asked how to give most of it away while still ensuring his daughter's future was secure. I know, but watching you tonight, defending me in front of all those people. Risking your professional reputation, confessing feelings I had no idea you had. Bobby turned to face her fully, his hand coming up to cup her face with the careful reverence of someone touching something precious. I realized I've been in love with you for years. I was just too terrified to admit it because I thought I had nothing to offer you. You have everything to offer me that actually matters, Diane said softly. Bobby kissed her then, and if their first kiss had been tentative exploration, this one was confirmation. The kind of kiss that tasted like 18 years of unspoken feelings finally finding voice. Like hope and new beginnings and the possibility that maybe loneliness wasn't the permanent condition Bobby had resigned himself to after Maria died. When they broke apart, both slightly breathless, Diane was smiling. So, does this mean I can stop pretending our quarterly portfolio meetings are purely professional? This means I'm taking you to dinner tomorrow night. A real dinner. Not a portfolio review disguised as a meal at a diner where the coffee is terrible. The coffee is terrible, Diane agreed. But the company has always been excellent. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, hands clasped, processing the evening's chaos and this new fragile thing emerging from the wreckage. Diane? Thank you. For seeing me. For 18 years of friendship and professional brilliance and apparently very subtle flirting that I was too oblivious to recognize. You're welcome. And Bobby? You're not oblivious because you're stupid. You're oblivious because you're fundamentally good and you don't expect people to have ulterior motives beyond what they explicitly state. That's one of the many things I love about you. Bobby's phone, that outdated device that required physical interaction, buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out to see a text from Emma. Can you come to my apartment? Need to talk. Bring Diane if she's still with you. 20 minutes later Bobby and Diane stood in Emma's small studio apartment, the kind of place young social workers could afford on nonprofit salaries, with furniture from discount stores and artwork from street markets and absolutely no smart home integration because Emma valued privacy over convenience. Tristan sat in the apartment's single chair looking like he'd aged a decade in the past 3 hours, his designer clothes rumpled, his confidence completely shattered. Emma occupied the futon couch, her eyes red from crying, still wearing the cocktail dress she'd worn to the rehearsal dinner that now felt like it had happened in another lifetime. Dad, why didn't you tell me? Emma's voice was raw, stripped of any pretense or performance. About the money. About everything. Bobby sat beside his daughter while Diane remained standing near the door, present but giving them space. Because I wanted you to build your life based on what mattered to you, not what I could buy for you. Because I wanted you to choose people based on their character rather than their bank accounts or social connections. Because your mother and I agreed, before she died, that if we were ever in a position to give you everything material, we'd resist that temptation and give you values instead. He took Emma's hand. When I won that lottery, you were 8 years old. Still processing losing your mom. I could have bought you anything, mansion, private schools, designer clothes, every material advantage money could purchase. But I remembered what Maria said when she was dying in that hospital room, raise her to be good, Bobby. Not to be rich. Those aren't the same thing and only one of them matters. Emma was crying again, tears streaming down her face smudging her carefully applied makeup. So you've been secretly a multimillionaire this entire time, living like we were struggling, making me work part-time jobs through college while you mopped floors. You worked through college because labor builds character. Because earning things yourself creates genuine self-respect and understanding of value that trust funds never teach. Because I wanted you to understand viscerally that your worth comes from who you are and how you treat people, not from what you possess or what you can display. Bobby's voice was gentle but firm. Did I get it wrong, Mija? Emma shook her head slowly. No. I'm the person I am because of how you raised me. I became a social worker because I watched you help people without expectation of recognition or reward. I value kindness over status because that's what you demonstrated every single day. I thought money didn't matter because you taught me it doesn't, not in the ways that actually define who we are. She looked across at Tristan, who flinched under her gaze. And then I met someone who believes the exact opposite. That money is everything. That social status is everything. That my father is worthless because he's just a janitor. Her voice hardened. Except now he's not worthless anymore. Now he's worth $47 million. Now he owns buildings and funds hospitals and sits on philanthropic boards. Now he's suddenly worthy of respect and deference. How incredibly convenient. Tristan's voice emerged hoarse with something between shame and desperation. Emma, that's not fair. I didn't know about his financial situation, and that's the entire problem. Emma stood abruptly, pacing the small apartment with barely contained fury. You didn't know, so you treated him like garbage. You laughed when your friends made jokes about him being a janitor. You told me not to make a scene when your mother insulted him. You seated him at the furthest table from the head table at your own rehearsal dinner because you were embarrassed to be associated with him. I was trying to make the wedding perfect. Perfect for who, Tristan? For you. For your parents. For your social media image and your networking opportunities and your carefully curated personal brand. Emma's voice cracked. You told people last night that this wedding is for high-class people. You were right about that. And my father is the highest-class person who was in that room. You just couldn't see it because you measure class in credit scores instead of character. Bobby spoke gently into the charged silence. Emma, what do you want to do about tomorrow? About the wedding, she looked at the engagement ring sitting on her coffee table, $30,000 of compressed carbon and social signaling. I don't know. The venue's booked. 300 guests have travel arrangements. The photographer, flowers, caterers, string quartet, it's all contracted and arranged. Walking away now would create chaos and expense for dozens of people. It's your choice, Mija. Whatever you decide, I support completely. I'll pay any cancellation fees or penalties. Money is just money. Your happiness matters infinitely more. Emma looked at Tristan with something like pity mixed with disappointment. Are you sorry because you hurt my dad? Or are you sorry because you might have damaged your relationship with someone who turns out to have money and connections? Tristan struggled visibly with honesty. His face cycling through emotions before settling on something like genuine contrition. I'm sorry because I should have treated your father with basic human respect regardless of his financial situation or social status. I was wrong. My family was catastrophically wrong. I let their values become my values, and I'm deeply ashamed of that. That's a good answer, Emma said quietly. But it's not enough. Because I need to know that you learned something fundamental tonight, not just that you got caught misjudging someone's net worth. She picked up the engagement ring and held it up to catch the light. I'm not going to marry you tomorrow. Maybe not ever. But I'm also not going to humiliate you the way your family humiliated my father. At 7 a.m. the next morning, Emma stood in the Belmont Grand Ballroom, the event space her father owned without anyone knowing, where she'd been scheduled to marry Tristan Blackwell in 7 hours. The venue was spectacular in the harsh morning light, crystal chandeliers reflecting early sun, $6,000 of white roses arranged with geometric precision, a setup designed to impress rather than comfort, to broadcast status rather than celebrate love. Emma wore jeans and an old university sweatshirt and felt more herself than she had in the cocktail dress last night. Tristan arrived still wearing his tuxedo pants from the previous evening paired with an undershirt, looking exhausted and uncertain and fundamentally diminished. What's going on, Emma? His voice carried none of yesterday's confidence. I'm not marrying you. Not today. Probably not ever. She held out the engagement ring. But I'm not going to humiliate you the way your family humiliated my father for 6 months. I don't understand. I'm going to go down to the venue at 2 p.m. as scheduled and tell all 300 guests that we've mutually decided to end our engagement. That we realized we want fundamentally different things from life. That we wish each other well and hope everyone can celebrate family and friendship even though there won't be a wedding. Her voice was steady, resolute. I'm going to let you save face because that's what decent people do. My father taught me that. Why would you do that for me after everything? Because causing you public pain doesn't undo the private pain you caused. Because humiliation isn't justice, it's just cruelty with better PR. Because I'm choosing to be better than the worst thing that happened to me. Emma looked around the ballroom at the expensive performance of status. Your family can still have their event. Call it a celebration of family, a networking opportunity, a charity fundraiser, whatever lets you salvage something from this. But I won't be here. She walked toward the exit, then paused. For what it's worth, Tristan. You didn't just lose a... Good morning, she said, sliding into the passenger seat and handing him coffee. How'd you sleep? Better than I have in years, Bobby admitted. You, same. Diane smiled, and Bobby was still getting used to the way his chest tightened when she looked at him like that, like he was something precious and rare rather than just her longest-standing client. His phone buzzed. Text from Emma, dinner tonight? My place? Want you to meet someone. Bobby showed Diane the message. Think she's ready to start dating again. I think she's ready to start living according to her own values rather than trying to fit into someone else's world. Diane took a sip of her coffee. That takes courage. She gets it from you. At noon, Bobby was helping the 8th grade science club set up their robotics demonstration when the principal, Dr. Susan Young, found him in the lab. Bobby, can we talk? My office. He followed her to the administrative wing, wondering if there'd been some complaint or maintenance issue he'd missed. Instead, Dr. Young closed her office door and turned to face him with an expression between amusement and exasperation. So, she said. I just received a very interesting email from the Belmont Grand Ballroom. Apparently they've been trying to contact the owner about hosting our winter fundraiser there. The owner who, according to their property records, is you. Bobby winced. I was planning to tell you, you own a $4 million event venue and you've been mopping our floors for 26 years? Dr. Young sat behind her desk. Bobby, I don't know whether to be impressed or concerned about your life choices. The kids need someone to mop the floors. The ballroom doesn't need me. It has property managers, that's. Dr. Young shook her head. That's possibly the most Bobby Martinez response imaginable. She pulled up something on her computer. I also received notification that someone established a $100,000 endowment for our STEM programs. Anonymous donor. Let me guess, the science kids need equipment. I had some money sitting around not doing anything useful. Bobby. Dr. Yang's voice softened. You know you don't have to keep working here if you don't want to. You could retire, travel, enjoy your wealth. I don't want to retire. I love this job. I love these kids. Why would I stop doing something that makes me happy just because I don't need the paycheck? Bobby met her gaze directly. Unless you're saying you want me to leave, are you kidding? You're the best custodian this school has ever had and possibly the best human being I know. I'm saying you have options. I want to make sure you're choosing this because you want to, not because you think you have to. I'm choosing this because it matters. Because Marcus Chin needs someone to notice when he's struggling. Because Sofia Rodriguez needs someone to believe in her. Because these kids need adults in their lives who show up consistently and care about them as humans rather than data points in achievement algorithms. Bobby smiled. That's worth more to me than any amount of money could buy. That evening Bobby and Diane arrived at Emma's apartment together, fingers interlaced, moving with the comfortable synchronization of people who'd been learning each other's rhythms. Emma opened the door looking happier and more relaxed than Bobby had seen her since before the engagement. Dad. Diane. Come in. She stepped back to reveal another woman sitting on the futon, late 20s, South Asian. Wearing scrubs with a hospital ID badge still clipped to the pocket. This is Dr. Priya Kapoor. We met at work. She's a resident at the hospital where I consult on family placement cases. Priya, this is my dad Bobby and his girlfriend Diane. Girlfriend, still made Bobby's chest do complicated things. Diane squeezed his hand. Priya stood to shake hands, her smile warm and genuine. Emma talks about you constantly. The janitor who funded 47 college scholarships while raising the world's best daughter. That's a hell of an origin story. The scholarships were Diane's idea, Bobby said. I just signed the checks. I provided investment strategy, Diane corrected. Bobby provided the values that determined where the money should go. They sat down to dinner, takeout from a Thai place that Emma loved, eaten on mismatched plates in the small apartment that Emma could afford on her social worker salary. Nobody mentioned the fact that Bobby could buy her a luxury condo tomorrow if she asked. Nobody needed to. The unspoken understanding was that Emma valued what she'd earned herself, and Bobby respected that completely. So, Emma said midway through pad thai. I've been thinking about the foundation. The Santos Family Foundation. Bobby looked up. What about it? I want to be involved. Not taking money, I'm not asking for that. But helping decide where grants go, which programs to fund, how to measure actual impact rather than just distributing cash. She glanced at Priya. Priya's been helping me understand effective altruism principles. How to do the most good with available resources. I think that's an excellent idea, Diane said. The foundation could benefit from Emma's perspective. She works directly with the populations we're trying to help. She knows what actually makes a difference. Bobby felt something warm and proud expanding in his chest. Your mother would love this. Seeing you use the money to help people instead of just inheriting wealth. That's what you taught me, Dad. That wealth is responsibility, not reward. That having resources means you're obligated to use them for something beyond yourself. Emma smiled. I'm just following your example. 3 months later Bobby stood on stage at the Women in STEM Foundation's annual gala, an event Diane had finally convinced him to attend despite his general avoidance of formal occasions. He wore a suit he'd owned for 15 years that Diane had insisted was perfectly fine, while also somehow making him look distinguished rather than outdated. Dr. Yang was presenting him with some award Bobby hadn't wanted but couldn't gracefully refuse, recognition for his anonymous philanthropy that was no longer quite so anonymous after the rehearsal dinner explosion had gone viral across social media. Bobby Martinez, Dr. Yang was saying into a microphone that fed to 300 people. Informal wear. Has funded 47 full college scholarships, paid medical bills for 11 families, built 2 community centers, and made countless other contributions to education and social services. And he did it all while working as a middle school custodian because, and I'm quoting him directly here, the kids need someone who shows up consistently. The audience applauded. Bobby felt profoundly uncomfortable being visible like this but endured it because Diane had explained this recognition would help the foundation attract additional donors. After the ceremony, standing at a cocktail reception where everyone wanted to talk to the mysterious philanthropist who'd been hiding in plain sight for nearly 2 decades. Bobby felt Diane's hand slip into his. You okay? She murmured. Hate being the center of attention, I know. But you're doing great. Just smile and nod and let me handle the aggressive networkers. A man approached, late 40s, expensive suit, confident handshake. Mr. Martinez. Richard Yamamoto, Venture Capital. I'd love to discuss potential collaboration on education technology investments. Bobby prefers to fund programs with proven community impact rather than speculative tech ventures, Diane interrupted smoothly. But thank you for your interest. She steered Bobby away, her hand warm in his, navigating the social landscape with practiced efficiency. My hero. Bobby said quietly, always. Diane smiled up at him. Though technically you're the hero. I'm just your handler. Handler sounds very professional and not at all romantic. Fine. I'm your girlfriend who happens to also manage your portfolio and protect you from venture capitalists at charity events. Better, much better. Across the room Bobby spotted Victoria and Marcus Blackwell, who'd apparently been invited because wealthy people always showed up to events where other wealthy people congregated. They saw him, recognition dawning, and immediately turned away as if to avoid acknowledgement. Bobby felt nothing. No anger, no satisfaction, no need to confront or engage. They'd revealed who they were. He'd moved on. Emma appeared at his elbow with Priya in tow. Dad, Priya's hospital wants to establish a program for medical students interested in serving underserved communities. We were thinking the foundation could fund it. What do you think? I think you should write a proposal and present it to Diane. She's the expert, I'm just the financial advisor, Diane protested. This is your foundation, it's Emma's foundation now too. And yours, if you'll let me add you to the board officially. Bobby looked at the two women who'd somehow become. The water heater is 40 years old, but it heats water. Diane laughed and kissed him. You're impossible, you love me anyway, I do love you. God help me. She settled against his side, comfortable and familiar. Bobby Martinez, custodian, philanthropist, most stubbornly humble man alive. Just Bobby, he corrected. Everything else is just what I do, not who I am. His phone buzzed. Text from Marcus Chin, the 7th grader whose deployed father Bobby had been checking on for years. Mr. Bobby, got accepted to advanced placement science. Thank you for believing in me. Bobby showed Diane the message. That's what matters. That kid's future. Not awards or recognition or people finally treating me with respect because they know my net worth. I know, Diane said softly. That's why I fell in love with you in the first place. Outside the rental house in the working-class neighborhood where people still waved from porches, the city hummed with its endless algorithms and status games and performances of wealth. But inside, in a modest living room with furniture from thrift stores and no smart home integration, Bobby Martinez had everything that actually mattered, love and purpose and the knowledge that he'd raised his daughter to value character over capital. Tristan Blackwell had regretted his words the morning after the rehearsal dinner. But Bobby had already moved on to building something better with people who'd seen his value all along. Sometimes revenge wasn't about destruction. Sometimes it was about revealing truth and walking away to build something real with people who mattered, and sometimes the highest class meant simply being good, no performance required, no external validation necessary, just authentic character lived consistently. Bobby Martinez, janitor and secret multi-millionaire, had always understood that. Now everyone else did too.